I think a lot of times people do hold on to those things and be like, oh, I don't want to bring that in. And it's like a fear. And it's a fear that if we don't do it this way, it's not going to be right. It's not going to be as fun or enjoyable. But
Mhm.
that's, what we've been talking about a lot with this is like letting go of that and having faith and trusting God. Like his plans are good and it can still be just as beautiful, even if it's not the same way that we imagine in our own minds.
Welcome back to the Before Midnight podcast. We're your hosts, Jessica and Felicia, and we hope you're having a wonderful start to the Christmas season. I can't believe it's Christmas time. As you can see, I have my tree. Felicia, where's your tree?
I have two trees. They're just in completely different parts of the house.
I
This
love
is
it
like
because Felicia is
this
such
is
a
like one of the
Christmas
only
person.
rooms that we didn't decorate. That is so funny. I thought about that too. I was like, I am like a crazy Christmas person. The rest of my house looks so Christmassy, and this office is so neutral.
I believe
Although
it.
no one can see this, but I do have a little fake olive tree right next to me, and I put little ornaments on it. So there is
I
something in
believe you.
here. Just
I
take it by
believe
faith.
you.
Yeah.
You got to go to Felicia's Instagram at Felicia Ciciola, and I'm sure she's got stuff from her house at
Oh yeah.
Christmas time because that is what
And
she
more to
does.
come. More to
More to
come. Yeah.
come. Yes. So keep an eye out. But I just find it funny that, like, I love Christmas too, very, very much. But I feel like Felicia's like the Christmas queen. And it's like my set is like super Christmassy because it's my living room. And then yours is
Yes.
like your office. So it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. There's absolutely nothing except my shirt. This Christmassy.
It's very Christmassy, more Christmassy than my outfit. I realized I don't really own a lot of red. So I was like, okay.
I don't either because I've been told that the red is actually that like one of the worst colors for me to wear according
Oh,
to my skin
really?
tone thing. Yeah, like bright oranges, bright reds. I'm not actually supposed to wear them, but for
Interesting. I would
Christmas I have
believe
to make
it
an
for me.
exception. It's like
Yeah.
the skin tone thing with the hair. I don't know. I don't know if people do
Yeah.
it, but
It's
yeah.
such a weird thing. I believe it for me too. I feel like I don't look good in red. That's why I don't buy a lot of red, especially like the bright Christmas red. Maybe like
Right.
I have more like wine color, like burgundy stuff, which maybe I
Yes.
should look at that.
That's a good
But
alternative.
yeah. So anyway, to each his own. What's
Anyway,
your Christmas color? I'm loving how I'm seeing more pink things, like hot pink, but then with like Christmas stuff on it.
really?
And that makes me really
Oh,
happy because I'm
no.
like, oh, I look great in that color.
Oh, for clothing. Okay, that's fun.
Yes,
That's
for
fun.
clothing. Sorry, for
Okay.
clothing. Yeah.
I'm thinking like
Yes.
decor that's, again, to each his
No,
own. I just couldn't do it because I'm such a classic Christmas person that if this like my
I
house is
know.
pink for Christmas, I'd be like, I need the Christmas colors back.
No, I don't feel like I could do like all pink decor. Some people do and it's cute, but I don't
It
think
can
I
be,
would
yeah.
feel at home with it. I like some
Right.
though. I've been starting to embrace more pops of pink because whenever I went to Magnolia Home, like
Mm-hmm.
last year in November, they had all their Christmas stuff out and she had like this like pink mauve color incorporated into a lot of the Christmas decor and I loved it. And I was like, wow, I never
Yeah.
thought of that. And so I told you I'm wanting to do more of like a nutcracker type Christmas this year. And I feel like that's
Yes.
very prevalent in it. So I'm like trying to, you can't really see anything from here, but I haven't gone full out in my Christmas decor yet, which you probably can't tell from this shot, but I haven't done it yet. So we're
Yeah, no,
going to
you
do
look
it.
like you're ready to go for Christmas. No one
I
can
know,
tell
but
from the foot by foot. Yes.
you're just seeing a very small section of my apartment. But yes, it's
Everything
very
else is
exciting.
Halloween.
No, I do have some faux fall florals still in one vase because I haven't gotten Christmas ones yet. So it's very confusing. But anyway, on that
Yes.
happy note, we are talking today about the Christmas season, something we're all experiencing right now. And
Mhm.
it's kind of neat. It's one of those holidays that everyone experiences around the world at the same time. You know, if you think about it, Thanksgiving is the United States, 4th of July is the United States. Most of our holidays were just in the United States.
True.
And then
Yeah.
I guess Easter is kind of all over, but it is more of a Christian holiday, even though other people do celebrate it. But I feel like it's very rare, more
Mhm.
so. But I feel
Yeah.
like Christmas is one of those holidays that it's celebrated everywhere around the world, no matter you. Obviously, it's celebrated in different ways, but
Mhm.
everyone's kind of celebrating it at the same time, which is really beautiful. And so what we wanted to talk about today is basically when the holidays look different than we had planned or the expectations that we put on it. And I think especially nowadays, I mean, I'm sure this has been the case since time began or Christmas began, but I feel like a lot of us put expectations on a lot of things, but specifically thinking about Christmas, we tend to put a lot of expectations on what it's going to look like. And so we want to have a good holiday season. We want to have a good Christmas season. So we put all these expectations of, oh, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to go see my family and they're going to treat me like this. And we're going to do these 5 traditions that we've done every single year. And I'm going to be happy and my husband's going to be happy and I'm going to get these gifts. Everyone's going to love their gifts. And it's just like, we
Right,
put a lot
exactly.
of pressure on this season. And a lot of it's coming from a good place, but a lot of times we end up disappointed.
Mhm.
And are we really disappointed because it was such a bad season? Or are we disappointed because we set so many specific expectations that were probably silly to have because they involve other people? And then our happiness is kind of based off that rather than just enjoying the moment. So just kind of wanted to unpack this concept. And one person that I think that I know you know, Felicia, that I think embodies this really well is Clark Griswold from a Christmas Vacation. Christmas Vacation. I love that movie so much. It was my first family vacation movie I saw, was the Christmas one.
It might be the only one I've ever seen in
Oh,
full.
really?
Yeah, for sure.
I
I've
definitely
seen
think
other
it's the
ones.
best.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen parts of other ones and I'm like, "Oh, this it's nothing compared to the one for Christmas."
I mean, the first one's pretty good. I think it's more like summer road trip though, so I feel like in the summer it's really fun.
Uh-huh.
But this one is just, it's so good. And I feel like it gives you all the right Christmas feels. Like,
Right.
even though it's not the greatest movie ever, I feel like it puts me right in that mindset and mood that I want to be at Christmas time with like the decorations and the family drama and just the traditions. And I don't know how to explain it. It makes me think of Christmas in the 90s. I just love it so
Right.
much.
That's so true,
Yeah.
and the snow and, like, the moments in it that he has that are funny are just
Hmm.
so funny. Like, when he's up in the attic and he's crying, he's, like, in
Oh my
one of
gosh.
those little, like, I don't know what it is, when he's got clothes wrapped around him and, like,
Yeah, old
he's just
lady
sitting up there
clothes to stay
crying.
warm because it's
Right.
freezing in the attic. And
It's
then they
just
pull
so
a
many
ladder down.
right. Oh my gosh. And I have to mention my favorite part, like, when he goes
Yes.
and he cuts off the stair railing because it's, like, not working, and so he just
That's
cuts
your
it off.
favorite part?
When he goes absolutely insane, I feel like it's just so good.
Well, I guess we just uncovered Felicia's humor. But
That's true,
yeah,
yeah, very dark.
yeah, very dark, very, yeah. So Clark Griswold, basically, for those of you who know and don't know, he basically puts a lot of pressure on Christmas, but not to be mean, not like he's putting pressure on other people. It's just he has a lot of good childhood memories surrounding Christmas, and he's just so caught up in having the perfect Christmas with all the family
Mhm,
together. His
mhm.
parents are coming into town, his wife's parents are coming into town, his cousin and his wife comes into town, which he did not expect, but that's a whole nother story. And he just really wants to have a big family Christmas because in his mind, his Christmases as a child were so magical. But what's funny is you watch him in the movie, and I think it's actually the scene you were talking about where he's in the attic watching home movies, and you see some of these childhood memories that he was talking about, right? And he's like a kid and you see his parents and they're like home videos, and you see him really happy and excited, but then you see the parents and like they're kind of stressed out, and like the dad like has a flask and he takes a drink, and then like it's just funny because what he imagined was so magical, which was his reality, like the parents, it wasn't quite as magical as maybe he imagined. Like maybe he was seeing
Uh-huh.
it through the eyes of a child. And a lot of the things that we look back on and go like, "Oh, that was perfect. It was perfect. And I just want to recreate it for my kids." But it wasn't perfect. Right? It
Right.
wasn't actually perfect. It was just as a kid, you love the memories that you make with your family. And
Mhm.
so he kind of has to realize that it's not about perfection, it's about being together and loving the people in your life. And so um basically I feel like he's just a really good example of that. And one scripture that I thought went really well with this is Proverbs 16 verse 9. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. And I feel like a lot of times we quote that scripture for a lot of different things, specifically maybe our purpose and our calling in life. But I thought, this really applies to everything. Like, we make our plans, we plan, we set out to do certain things, which isn't bad, but then we need to remember that the Lord directs our steps. We may have expectations and we may have things that we want to happen, but when we release those expectations to Him and go, God, I want to flow in what you have for me this year, then I think it can actually operate a lot smoother because no 2 years are the same.
Yeah, exactly. And with like when you mentioned as a kid how you remember things differently and you kind of
Yeah.
romanticize things, it's so true. And I mean, I still do that too with like memories of years in the past where I was like, oh, stuff was so good. And then I was like, oh, well, this did happen that year. And maybe I kind of just blocked it out. But also, like when we're kids and that's what we're thinking about, and that's what we're comparing our current season 2, we also need to remember that a lot of times as kids, like, our parents were protecting us from a lot of the drama that was going on because they were wanting us to have a better holiday, and so maybe some of the health stuff or the fights or something like that, it's like, just, pretend that everything's good and just listen to Christmas music, and so we're thinking as adults, "Why doesn't it feel like that?" And it's because it
Yep.
never really was like that. Life was still happening around us, but we may have
Exactly.
just been a bit more sheltered, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so true.
Yeah.
We have I remember Christmas felt so magical as a kid. And,
Mhm.
my mom went out of her way to make it that way.
Right.
She really loves, still to this day, she loves Christmas. She loves decorating. She loves making it magical. And
Mhm.
that goes a long way, but yeah, it's like you said, it's like it's not about the perfection, it's about the memories. And
Mhm.
it's just important to remember that because too often we take what we experienced as a kid and we want it to replicate it here, but we don't understand what made it magical. We think it was the all the situations and the circumstances being perfect when
Right.
it wasn't in reality.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, we've talked a lot about like external stuff, right? And how those external reasons why we might not be feeling that exact same way that we did before. And it could be, like a health thing. It could be that plans aren't going right. The flight was canceled or something. But also, it could be like internally, we aren't feeling like we think we should. Once that time of the year hits, I think there's this expectation on us that all of a sudden we're supposed to be like a Hallmark movie character where, our emotions are very surface level and we're happy and we're treating everybody perfectly and we're not getting worked up over anything, right? And it's
It's
like,
true. We laugh at these Hallmark movies and like they're
mm,
so cheesy, but then we like expect our lives to be just like them.
right. And we expect our attitudes and, like, all of our emotions to be just like that too, and
Yeah.
it makes sense. I mean, like, you think about the music that's playing, it's like, it's the most wonderful time of the year and, like, have a holly jolly Christmas,
Don't
and I love that stuff, it makes the time of the year special, and it's great.
Yeah, it does.
I'm glad that we still have that expectation, but it can become very unhealthy when we are wanting ourselves to feel a certain way and we want even if we've had a hard year and then all of a sudden this time of the year hits and we expect a switch to flip in us. It's like, okay, now I should just be taking on all these things and we've internalized the music and the movies that we've watched and that can make it even more stressful, right? Instead of just accepting like, okay, it is Christmas time, it is Thanksgiving, there are things to be excited about, but I have been through these things recently in the year and there's stuff that has come up that's been very real. And so just having that grace on yourself and realizing that because I found for me that when I when I'm expecting myself to feel a certain way and I'm not, it's actually a lot harder to get to that place. It's, like, a lot harder to find that joy and that peace inside when I'm just, like, putting so much pressure and questioning, "Why do I not feel that way?" It actually makes it a lot harder to get there. So, yeah, I think just having those internal expectations too, um, can be just as harmful as expecting stuff to go right outside, like, with other people and plans and stuff, like you were mentioning with the movie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. I mean, I think a lot of times we put expectations on a situation like a holiday or an event to feel a sense of control over what we want to happen. Like, I want this to happen this way. Therefore, I'm going to put these expectations on how this is going to go so that I can feel like I have this sense of control over it actually happening out the way I want. When really it's like a false sense of control because you can't control other people. You can't control circumstances outside yourself. And, when we put our faith in God, it kind of releases that control over, like, the need to have control over everything. And it causes our hearts to have to stand in faith. And I think, like, it might seem weird to, like, bring God into something like our expectations on Christmas, but I think it's actually really connected to our faith in God because we do this with a lot of stuff as Christians, right? Like, we get a promise from God and we start putting all these expectations on it. Like, oh, well, God showed me that I'm going to be a pastor of a church. So that means I'm going to be pastoring by this age and I'm going to have a church with this many people and it's going to work out like this. And we start, that's a very basic example, but how many times do we feel like God's showing us something, but then we start putting all these expectations on it that maybe weren't from God? And when those expectations start to not happen or not work out, then all of a sudden we start losing faith in the promise when the promise was still there. It's just we're the ones who put all those expectations on it. And so I think the same thing can happen with something like the holidays. I believe that God wants us to have a wonderful holiday season, and maybe there's some great things he wants to do in this season with your family, with your life, with your home. And but we start, in order to, like, feel like we need to make this happen, I can't go a season without making this happen. Then we put all these expectations on it. And then as soon as one of those expectations doesn't happen, we start thinking like, well, it's going to be a terrible holiday season. What happened?
Right.
And it's like, well, maybe,
Right.
maybe God wanted to do something different,
Yeah.
and kind of guide you in a different way. Maybe someone's really hurting and they don't seem like they're hurting and they need you to spend more time with them. Like, it could be any number of things. But it's just really important, I think, to release some of those expectations. It doesn't mean we don't plan. And if you're hosting family, maybe think of some things to do with them and stuff. But I think it's just important to also give our expectations to God and go, you know what? No matter what happens this holiday season, I know that you can help me have a great time and help me be a blessing to those around me.
It's so true. I think we have the same notes. Like, I think somehow, because my next section of stuff was all about, like, how expectations are a form of control and releasing. That's fantastic, though. I mean,
Well, they
it's
are. So
exactly. They really are. And, one great example of this was, I think it was 2 Christmases ago at this point, but stuff had happened beforehand too, so it was already some disappointment. But what I remember is that we had gone to Florida, and I love that time of year. Like, I love being able to be with my family for that week or week and a half. It's about a weekish time. But Brian started not feeling well like a few days before Christmas. And then we found out on the night of Christmas that Brian had COVID. And at that
Merry
point, like,
Christmas.
exactly right. Yeah. And so, like, I'm starting to freak out, and I'm like, okay, we have to go isolate ourselves. And so I spent, like, the next day kind of isolated. I didn't have it. I never got it, thankfully. But I spent the next day, like, isolating myself in, like, my old room. And Brian was, like, just passed out for, like, a whole day. He was really tired from the COVID. And I had had such high expectations, and I had had such, an expectation on, like, again, the time that we would be able to spend and what stuff would look like, and so that hit 100 times harder for me, and I feel like it took me, like, all the month of January to kind of get past that because I was just like, now I remember, our flight had also gotten canceled home, so we had to, like, figure out our way home and drive home, and then I started feeling weird on that night we were supposed to have the, 80s prom, and so I wasn't able to go to
Yeah.
that, and that all was, like, within a couple week period, And so that hit really hard. But if I hadn't had
Yeah.
so many expectations on how stuff was gonna go, like, in planning everything and trying to keep control of, "This is when we're gonna get there. This is when we're gonna leave. This is when, I'm gonna go to this party right when I get," like, all that stuff, even though it would have still been a disappointment, it wouldn't have hit so hard because I had put so many, like, eggs in that basket of when I get to my family, like, then I can just relax and it's gonna be peaceful, right? And I had put so much emphasis on that going so well that, no matter what was going on before that trip, it was like, "Oh, this is tiring," or "I'm exhausted, but at least I have this," and then right? So when you have that form of control where you're just planning on things going a certain way and they don't, it definitely hits a lot harder.
It's so true, 'cause if you think about it, if we put it says hope deferred makes the heart sick.
Mhm.
And so if we're putting our hope in these expectations that we've got set up, these mile markers
Right.
that prove to us that we're on the right track or whatever it is, or that God will fulfill his promise, as if we need mile markers, right? But when we put our hope in those things externally that we can't control, then as soon as they start going wrong one after the other, like you just said, it can eventually start to make our hearts sick. And faith is a substance of things hoped for. And so if we start to lose our hope because they're in all these other things, then it starts to become hard to even walk in faith sometimes. And we feel like, I want to have faith, but I don't know, things never work out the way I want. Well, maybe our faith isn't in the right place. I've shared this story on the podcast before, but basically I remember has nothing to do with Christmas. But basically we were getting our wisdom teeth removed and I was nervous because I had to get all four removed at the same time. And so I was just getting really scared because I was like, I don't want a dry socket. I don't want a dry socket, right? I'd heard like so many horror stories and I was just starting to get into a lot of fear, which I didn't think I would. And so I was, great woman of faith I was going around repeating scriptures, like that talked about healing and just like all this kind of stuff. And I was like repeating them as if they would keep me from getting a dry socket. And I remember finally, Jeff just kind of looked at me and he was like, look, he's like, you don't sound like you're in faith. You sound like you're in fear. And he said, if you want to believe that you won't get a dry socket, I'll believe with you, but even if you do, you need to know that God is always with you and you're going to be fine. And in that moment, I kind of realized, like, that's kind of the issue here. It's the fear. I'm not repeating these scriptures because, like, I know I'm going to be fine. I'm trying to chant them like a magic spell as if it's going to keep me from getting what I'm afraid of. And it's like, but what can man do to me, right? Like, if we have Jesus on the inside of us, nothing should make us cower in fear. Absolutely nothing. Because no matter what this life throws at us, Jesus is with us and he's able to overcome it. And so when I just stopped doing all that and I just started thinking about the fact that Jesus was with me in the midst of that situation, the fear started to leave and I just kept focusing on that. And you know what? I didn't get a dry socket, but even if I had, it's like he would have gotten me through it. And I think it's kind of similar with this. It's like you're saying I had all these expectations on how this was supposed to go. And so the
Mhm.
moment something goes wrong, it's easy to start toppling over and
Right,
to start
everything's
going,
unraveling.
oh no, everything is
Yeah.
unraveling. And it's like, God is like, wait a second, I'm still here. Like, I'm
Right.
still God and I'm still with you. Like,
Yeah.
you kind of thought it was going to go that way, but that's not the only way things can go. And
Mhm.
it's just like, I don't know, it makes us more secure Christians when we're able to kind of approach things that way. When our faith is in God, no matter what happens, our faith is in God versus all of these expectations that we've posted around ourselves.
Right, exactly. And a good verse for this and what we've been talking about is a well-known verse, Jeremiah 29:11, and it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." I know usually when I feel like I've heard that verse in the past, it's about, like your job in the future and stuff like that, or if you're going through a hard time, it's like, it's gonna be okay, right? I have good plans for you. But I think it's really applicable to when we make plans for ourselves during the holidays. And it's because we want to make sure that we're happy and that we're experiencing it to the fullest extent. We want to make sure that other people are enjoying themselves, right? And so we take a lot of this, what we think is control, right? Because we never really have control over situations, but we attempt to do that because we're so afraid that if we don't, that it's not going to go right and it's not going to be enjoyable anymore. And so that verse really just says like God has good plans for us. He has a hope and a future for us, even with the small stuff, right? Because we talk about that on the podcast. It's like God doesn't just care about, you following his plans for you and like doing things for other people. That's super important. But he also cares about what your life looks like in the day to day and, the time that you're spending with your family, right? And so, sorry, I heard sirens in the background.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. I was just like,
It's
I thought that was Mocha for a second, your cat. And so I was like,
no,
was
that's
is he
definitely,
okay?
he's fine. Trust me.
I'm happy to hear it. Yeah. So basically just realizing that even for holiday stuff, even for plans that you have with your friends or your family, God has a hope and a future. He has good plans for you. You don't have to worry about taking it into your own hands. And, you're talking about letting it go. And I was thinking of, that illustration I've heard in the past of like when you with a kid, if you ever put like a butterfly or a moth or something in a kid's hand, it's, like, tempting to wanna hold it and be like, "Oh, it's so pretty," and squeeze it, and, like, you can't do that with something fragile, and our life is fragile, right? It's like, in God's hands, He has it holds it securely, but when we try to take stuff into our own hands and just squeeze it so hard because we want it to go exactly as we planned, like, that's when stuff is going to start to actually unravel because we don't have that illusion of control that we think we do. But when we release that to God, that's when he can really work with it, and he knows what's best, right? Not just for us, but for other people, like you were saying before. He knows, like, if somebody is needing more attention and it's more time, or if somebody needs you to go and visit them or something like that during the time of year, it's like he knows these things, but he also wants us to experiencing that joy and peace. So, just releasing that to him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true. It's like when our holiday season becomes less about us and
Yeah.
more about manifesting a wonderful holiday season to other people,
Mhm.
then we become more like sensitive to like, okay, God, what do you want to do? What is this going to look like?
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, when we need to control, it shows a lack of trust in God, really. Because we feel like we have to do something because God maybe doesn't have our best interests at heart.
Mm.
And I thought about another good little clip from the Bible. Um, and it's Mary and Martha, but this time it's not the story you think it is. It's when they show up later in the story, and it's when Lazarus has died. They're there. And so this is in John chapter 11, starting in verse 17. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. I remember like, Martha, Martha, you're worried about many things. And Mary's all like, I'm doing the better thing, right? Well, in this case, Mary stayed home and Martha ran out to meet Jesus. So there's a story there. Like,
Mhm.
there's so much for us. Martha didn't just get it all wrong. Martha
Mhm.
said to Jesus, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. And what I see
Mm.
in this scripture, and this is just what I see from it, but I feel like here's a woman who is not complaining to Jesus, right? Because if Jesus had been there, he would have healed her, but he wasn't there yet. He didn't get there in time. And so I see a woman who's not upset, but whose faith, even though the situation looks impossible, is in Jesus. So even though the situation didn't go the way she thought it was supposed to go, she's not wavering on the power that Jesus has on the inside of him, which as born again believers, which she was not, we have that power on the inside of us. We're not waiting on God to do something. And so I think that's just a really beautiful example of when things don't go the way that we think they're supposed to go, then where's our faith, right? Like we said, was it in our expectations of all of these things working out in a certain way? Or is it in Jesus? Because when we keep our hope and our faith anchored in Jesus, He is the only sure thing that will carry us through every situation and every holiday season and every season of life. And He will never fail us, even if things don't look the way that we thought they were supposed to. A lot of times I think about my life too. And even just in thinking about our lives and like what we're going to do with our lives, the greatest thing that I could think of for my life, the greatest thing, the biggest dream I had, I feel like I have already done things with God that are way better. Like way better. Like than the thing I thought I was going to do with my life. And it's all because I just took a chance on God. And it wasn't always perfect. It wasn't always easy. It didn't always seem like things were working out well. But even like with our homes, every home that we've gotten, it was a supernatural situation. And I didn't have that in mind. And then moving out here to California, I didn't have that in mind. And yet it's gone so much better than I could have imagined. And I've kind of just had to get to the point when people are like, so what do you want to do? I'm like, I've got some dreams and I've got some things in my heart and I am pursuing them, but my hands are off the wheel. I'm like, whatever God's gonna do, it's like so much better than what I can think of. And He knows me so much better than I know myself. And so I think applying that to not just our purpose in life, but to something like the Christmas season or visiting family, or maybe you're planning a really big trip and it's a really important vacation and it has to be perfect. It's like releasing some of those expectations and just being like, here's my plan, God, but you know what? I know that you know what's best for us. And just kind of, yeah, keeping our faith in Jesus like Martha
Right.
did, rather than in what I thought was supposed to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Brian and I have honestly just had a conversation about that recently because, as you know, we talked a lot about moving to South Carolina for a long
Hmm.
time. Like, this was
Yeah.
kind of in the summer of this year. And then we've been talking a little bit more about moving to a different area, North Carolina, and everything. And it's just like, well, what would you do there? And what job would you have? There's nothing there that's related to the ministry and like conversation about kids and all this stuff. And it's like, we were talking about that after Thanksgiving dinner. It was kind of nice to have just us because then we just started talking about life stuff. And, it kind of eventually got to a point in the conversation where it was like, everything that has happened with Brian's job and where he is now has been God opening doors and kind of like putting stuff in his lap where it's not like he doesn't have to work for it, he doesn't have to do interviews and stuff, but it was like he wasn't struggling to figure it out when it happened to him. Like him meeting Jeff and then him, like Jeff and Jeremy being the reason that I was like, oh, yeah, like Bible college sounds great. And I do need that foundation. That led him to where he's working now. And like him being friends with Robbie was the reason he met me. And so the same goes for me too. Like in my life, I spent a lot of time in middle school and high school. Like, how am I ever going to find the right person? It's going to take years at this rate. And all these people like that I've met,
At
I
this
don't,
rate, you're in
at
like
this
high
rate in
school.
high school.
So
Well, I
behind.
don't know. Yeah, right. So behind, but like it's so easy to start to try to figure stuff out on our own. And when you really think about it, at least for my life and Brian's life, and I'm sure so many other people that are listening, you realize that a lot of the opportunities and the good that's come in your life has literally come from the path that God has you already walking on. It's not like you had to get off course and solve all these problems and see the future to know what to do. And so that's just been encouragement for me recently because there is a lot of things that are up in the air and questions that you have that you can have about what do I do? Where do I work? Where do I live? Right. But if you're just like following God's voice, He will make those things more obvious than you having to hunt them down. But a couple other things I had, just short things for this time of year and like the Christmas season, is one of them is the perspective that we have. And perspective is so big, but especially this time of year, like One thing that I've been doing recently with my I'm at like a doctor, and he's kind of approaching stuff like in my symptoms in a natural way. And so a lot of it's been cutting out specific foods, and thankfully it's coming to an end soon where I'll be able to eat certain stuff again. But it's been like cutting out sugar, dairy, gluten, everything. So I can't eat much right now. I broke that obviously for Thanksgiving, but one thing for me that I've always thought about Christmas is, like, all the fun stuff I can drink and all the sugary drinks and, like, all the apple pie, pumpkin pie, right? Like, and I think it can be easy this time of year, um, like we've said before with expectations, like, if something is not going exactly as planned, it's easy to focus on that. But just changing perspective and being like, "Well, what is good about this?" Right? Or like maybe the situation itself doesn't have anything that you can really say, "Oh, well, that's a good part of it." But like what in your life has gone right? Because even with the situation with Brian and us having to, quarantine ourselves, like having the perspective of, well, at least I'm not at work right now, right? At least I still have this time off where Brian can rest and I can rest, even though it doesn't look exactly right. So, perspective is just so huge during this time of year because stuff isn't going to go exactly as planned. So, what can we look at and be like, this is something to be grateful for right now? This is something to have joy over and to be able to just appreciate because the holidays bring a lot of good, and there are things that aren't gonna go as planned, but, like, even, maybe a family, you don't have your whole family here, but who can I spend this extra time with this year? So, yeah, just perspective and just having gratitude.
Yeah, no, that's really good. A shift in perspective is such a good point for this time of year. And I think kind of right in the same vein of a perspective shift is one
Mhm.
thing I wrote down is people are usually more stressed out during the holidays.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And sometimes
100%.
this is something I have to like remind myself of because sometimes you're dealing with people, whether it's people you see at the grocery store or people at work or people at the airlines or I mean, I don't know, there's
Right.
all kinds of people that you run into. Maybe it's just your
Mhm.
friends and family. But sometimes we put a lot of expectations on how people are going to behave this time of year. But this is a time of year when people are probably going to behave the worst because it's like they're really stressed out. People are so stressed out this time of year. We've got the holiday season, it's expensive. People are worried about their money. People are worried about travel. A lot of times, like you said, travel gets canceled, and then that causes a lot of stress. And then it's also about to be a new year. So I think people are kind of reflecting on their life and being like, what am I doing with my life? So there's like a lot going on in people's lives and hearts at this time. And so I think just kind of in our dealings with people and as we go into the holiday season, just realizing that, hurting people hurt people and just kind of being able to give grace to people during this time, knowing that a lot of people are not going to be like probably behaving in a way in which they would even probably approve of. But
Mhm.
that's just kind of the reality of like life and what people go through this time of year.
It's so true. And I think it goes along too with everything we've said with expectations like that we have over other people. And my next point was just remembering what the year is about. And I think a lot of the times it's easy to get into this mindset, especially like we kind of started off with as children, all these things that Christmas was about for us back then. And it was about the music, it was about the food, it was about everyone being in a great mood and
My
Santa and
giant
like
light up candy cane that I had in my room.
right. It was about all those things. And the problem is that all of those things are external. Like they're also fleeting. And even if those things are still there, a lot of times we can find that when we get older, we don't feel the same way that they used to make us feel. And it could be with just honestly age, but also like our lives look very different. We have a lot more things to think about. And so stuff doesn't make us feel the same. So just remembering like what is this year or what is this season about? And not in a religious way, like don't celebrate, don't listen to that music, but remembering that it is about Jesus and um it is about what he has given to us, and it's about those things. And what's beautiful is that those things don't change, right? Like those things aren't fleeting, and every year the story and the truth to that is just as powerful and it's just as beautiful. And so when we hold on to that and we make that the center of it, not in a way to just like take all the fun and all of the because a lot of people don't like the fact that, oh, it's too commercialized. And I totally get that. But just being able to balance both, but knowing that Jesus is still at the heart of it because those things will never change.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's really good. And I mean, the last thing that I wanted to say is to not be afraid to make new traditions. And
Mm,
I think that's something that I've had to embrace as well, even getting married. A lot of times what you're bringing from your childhood, your spouse is bringing stuff from their childhood usually. And so sometimes it's like, oh, well, I don't do it that way, but I do it this way. And just kind of being open to seeing the holidays through another person's eyes, and making it magical for them. And there are things that my mom has done for me and my brother growing up that I like to carry on into Christmas. But then there's things that like Jeff grew up with or Jeff did with his siblings that now we try to carry on together at Christmas time, or even traveling and meeting like friends in other countries and kind of like hearing what their traditions are and stuff, and kind of finding ways to incorporate that or reach out to them during that time. And I just think it's important because sometimes so much of the missed expectations is because we're being very closed off
uh-huh.
to other people and to other traditions, and the
Yeah.
memories we could be making in this season of our life. Like this season in our life is different. We're in a new state and we're in a new apartment, and it's different. It's going to look
Uh-huh.
different. And if I try to compare Christmas to years in the past, then I could just set myself up to be disappointed because it just can't look the same. It's a different season. So instead, I can be like, okay, what can I bring over that's important to both of us, to Jeff and to me? And then also, how can we make it special here in this new season? You know? And so I think that's just also super important to remember, is that not only is it good to embrace new things based on the season of life you're in, but also like embrace traditions from other people in your life and let them be a part of the magic. And realizing, like you said, no matter like what traditions you follow, at the heart of it, it's all about Jesus, and he can be
Right.
expressed in a lot of these different traditions. And so letting yourself
Mhm.
experience a new one, it can make it really fun.
Yeah, it's so true. I think a lot of times people do hold on to those things and be like, "Oh, I don't wanna bring that in." And it's like a fear. And it's a fear that if we don't do it this way, it's not gonna be right. It's not gonna be as fun or enjoyable. But
Mhm.
that's what we've been talking about a lot with this is like letting go of that and having faith and trusting God. Like his plans are good and it can still be just as beautiful, even if it's not the same way that we imagine in our own minds.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think just at the heart of it is, the holiday season comes once a year. And even though
Mhm.
that can make us feel a little nervous and like, oh no, it's got to be
Yeah.
perfect, it comes once a year, right? Really,
Right.
it's just about being in the moment and about really enjoying the people that are in your life in this moment, enjoying the season of life that you're in at this moment, and enjoying the opportunities that God brings you, to celebrate Him and to really, I see it as like helping other people find the joy in the holiday season, because so many people are just struggling this time of year, struggling with depression and sadness. I mean, all
Loneliness,
these
yeah.
loneliness, so much loneliness, and just a lot of probably broken expectations that they've
Mhm.
had on the holiday season. And so we have a real opportunity to kind of bring healing and peace to that, because we're not bound by those external expectations, right? So I hope that this episode encouraged you, and I hope that it helps give you a great start to this amazing holiday season that we have. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, then be sure and like it and subscribe to this podcast, so that you can see all the episodes we have coming your way.
And if you didn't know, we're also on Instagram and Facebook, so make sure to check us out on there. And until next week, remember,
To have courage.
and be kind.